Good evening. Thank you all for braving this cold weather we've got, this frigid weather. We'll try to keep it nice and warm and lively for you here in Lorfink. My name is Mo Alethi, and I am Executive Director of the Institute of Politics and Public Service at the McCourt School of Public Policy, and so excited to welcome you all to the third annual Georgetown Mayors Forum. A couple of years ago, our institute is fairly new on campus. We were founded in the fall of 2015. And in our first year, as we were planning our programming, we believe very strongly that public service takes many forms and happens everywhere. Too many people in this town focus on Capitol Hill, down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. But when you look at our programming, we try to look at it in all of its many elements, whether it's federal government, whether it's state government, whether it's global politics, and in a few weeks we just announced we'll be hosting former Secretary Hillary Clinton on campus as part of a discussion on the future of diplomacy. But just as important as any of those is local government and public service at the most local level, where the notion of public service meeting the public is the most acute and the most real and the most relevant. Over the past couple of years, we've been very fortunate to host this forum in conjunction with the beginning of the annual, or at least the winter meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors here in Washington. And we are thrilled to partner with them again, as well as, for the second year, the Global Cities Initiative, led by Uwe Brandes here at Georgetown, and you'll hear from him at the conclusion of the event. But none of this would happen if it weren't for the support of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And honestly, one person there more than anyone else, Tom Cochran, who is the CEO and Executive Director of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Now, Tom's going to come out here in a second, and I'm going to tell you something about Tom. One, this guy can hold a job. He has been at the U.S. Conference of Mayors for over 30 years. No one holds a job that long in this town. But he is a guy who has, throughout his entire adult professional life, demonstrated a real commitment to America's cities and working with America's mayors to get results. Second thing I learned about Tom very, very early in our conversations with him is that whenever Tom speaks, mayors listen. I think the secret of success for most of America's mayors is that they just do whatever Tom Cochran tells them to do. So I want to thank you all for being here, and please join me in welcoming our co-host for the evening, Tom Cochran from the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Welcome back to Georgetown.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Mo. What an introduction. It's good to be back, and we've been doing this now for 3 years. We have 350 mayors across town in the Capitol Hilton. And we have several mayors that are running for president, but this is about women tonight. And after I've said that, we have 3 women running for president. Came out of the gate before anyone else did, so we are looking forward to listening to them. Throughout our history, we've had a number of women mayors who become president of our organization, and we also have a women's leadership conference inside our organization that was created by Mayor Feinstein when she was mayor of San Francisco. We come to Washington at a strange time when the government has shut down, when there is gridlock, when people that don't like each other can't sit down and have a compromise. That's not true with mayors. Every day, mayors sit down with people they probably don't like and come up with a solution. They keep their cities running. Just today, Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles, before he came here, settled a teacher strike, working in a very, very controversial way to get it done. So we salute our mayors. We salute Georgetown for this conference. Thank you, Mo. Sheila will be here. Sheila, we work with her with Global Parliament Mayors. And so thank you again for coming. You've got three dynamic mayors here. Your hometown mayor, Mrs. Couts, who you will hear later, has been our president, and also the emerging leader from Dayton, Ohio, will be introduced also. So thank you once again. It's my honor to bring up your distinguished student, Christy Swinney. Thank you a lot.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here on this extremely cold night. So my name is Christy Swinney. I'm a doctoral student in the government department and the research fellow for the Global Cities Initiative that is helping to sponsor this event. It is my great honor to introduce tonight's extremely distinguished panelists who are entering the stage here. I've only been given 2 minutes to do this introduction, and I've been told to actually stick to that. So I will have to leave out the endless list of accolades, accomplishments, honors, awards, etc., that I could easily enumerate for each of our extremely accomplished panelists here, including our moderator. The first of our amazing panelists is the Honorable Muriel Bowser, Mayor of the District of Columbia. Mayor Bowser became the first woman ever reelected as mayor of Washington, D.C. on November 6, 2018, and the first mayor ever to earn a second term in 16 years. She coasted into her new term with over 76% of the vote. And prior to being elected mayor, she served as a member of D.C.'s council, representing D.C.'s 4th Ward. Our second panelist here is the Honorable Nanette Whaley, who's actually on the end there. She's mayor of Dayton, Ohio. Mayor Whaley was elected in 2013 by a double-digit majority, and she was reelected in 2017 without opposition, a first in Dayton's history. Prior to being elected mayor, she served 2 terms on Dayton's City Commission. When she was first elected in 2005, she was the youngest woman ever to serve on the commission. You can see there are many firsts amongst our distinguished panelists. Third, we have, and in the middle, in the red, the Honorable Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of Burnsville, Minnesota. Mayor Couts was unbelievably first elected in 1994 and has served for 24 consecutive years. She currently is in her 7th term as mayor of Burnsville. She recently served as the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and prior to being elected mayor, she was one of the first women to serve as a pastoral minister within the Catholic Church. And finally, moderating tonight, we have Professor Sheila Foster, who is not only the first woman to hold a joint appointment with the Law Center here at Georgetown, as well as the McCourt School of Public Policy, but the first person ever to hold a joint appointment. And we are very honored to have all of you here. So with that, I will turn it over to our panelists, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and I should mention that Christy Swinney is also the fellow with our Global Cities Initiative, which is a new initiative here on campus and is co-sponsoring this event. So thank you, Christy. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, mayors. In the year of the woman, apparently, it's great to have an all-female mayor panel. That's not the topic of our conversation, but we would be remiss if we didn't point that out. So it's wonderful to have you all here. So it's said that we are living in the age of urbanization, right? We all know this. More of us in the world, more of us here live in cities or suburbs, metropolitan areas. And like Brunsville, which is, by the way, about 15 miles south of Minneapolis, right? Okay. Cities are increasingly, not only where we live, it's where the jobs are, right? Where our economy is thriving, and where migrants come, where climate change is impacting us, and the transition to a renewable future is happening. This puts tremendous stress on our infrastructure and on our leaders. And so today, what we're going to talk about is some of the challenges and opportunities around infrastructure, inclusion, and innovation. And so let's start with infrastructure. One of our persistent challenges of all of our homes and our cities is aging infrastructure of all kinds: roads, bridges, tunnels, housing, et cetera. Each of these mayors have overseen the redevelopment of their downtown areas. many of, if not all of, which were in some sense previously distressed. And you can talk about what that looks like, but clearly if we for those of us in the district, it's been an incredible turnaround. In Dayton, they've had the recent reopening of the Levitt Pavilion and a new bike sharing program. And in downtown Brunsville, the mayor recently has basically rebuilt that downtown and on about 60 acres of land. So one of the things I want to talk about first is the tension between redevelopment and affordability and inclusion. It seems that the more revitalized the core of a city gets, the less affordable it becomes, and I know a lot of us are thinking about this. So Mayor Bowser, I'll give you the home court advantage, since we're in your home, in essence. One of your top priorities as mayor, and I've heard you say it time and time again, is ensuring that Washington is a place where residents and entrepreneurs of all backgrounds can live, right? And how are you working to make this a reality? And importantly, how are you constrained in doing so?
Well, thank you for that question. And I like the way you posed the question and making sure when you talk about infrastructure, you talk about housing. Oftentimes, housing is left out of an infrastructure discussion. And it's key to how a city grows. And we have certainly, over the last 15 years, experienced an incredible renaissance in Washington, D.C. So not just our downtown revitalized, but neighborhoods across all 8 wards of Washington are attracting more people, more places of business, more opportunities for entertainment, you name it. People live, work, dine, play in places that they hadn't just 15 years ago. So the stress, and that's exactly what it is, of adding 800 people a month to your city, we've been as high as 1,000 people a month, means that you have a hot city, okay? You don't want to live in a city that's not hot, right? And so we want to encourage growth and attracting people to our town and attracting good jobs, but it does make everything so much more expensive, and housing is the key. So we have really spent the last 4 years doubling down, literally doubling the investments that we've made in affordable housing, and I've challenged our whole city in the next 4 years to think even bigger. I'm leading now a task force of city leaders on housing. And across the nation, what people are telling us is we're tapping all of our tools. We have a great tool, the Housing Production Trust Fund. We have other great tools like inclusionary zoning. But we know that we won't be able to get what our region and city needs with our existing tools. So we're thinking bigger, and we're asking the whole city to be a part of our solution by adopting goals for each neighborhood.
That's terrific to hear. I live in one of those areas that one would never go to, NOMA. And it's true. Yes. And there's always the underside of development that you've talked about, and that is to making sure that everyone is included. Mayor Couts, I want to turn to you. On a similar question, according to your reelection website, you say you believe that the work of the government is to set the table with the infrastructure and allow the private sector to fill it with abundance. It's a great quote. How is this manifested in the redevelopment of Burnsville, and are there any downsides to this approach, particularly for the affordability of a suburb in a hot metropolitan area?
I'm glad you asked that question because people always want to understand if there is affordability when you work with the private sector. But the private sector is also your nonprofits. And not to forget that there are a lot of housing that are built by nonprofits. So in defining and designing a vision for this 60-acre site that was depressed and becoming very crime-infested, it was bringing people together, the property owners as well as all of the developers, and ask the question, what do we want our city to look like? And for me, it was about creating an urban center and creating a pedestrian-friendly environment, as well as making sure that everyone is welcomed. So in doing that, we did set the table, and we used tax increment financing pooling funds to do the streetscapes and the decorative lighting, and invited the private sector to come and build. And we asked for 20% of the housing stock to be affordable. And they worked with the county as well with HUD and other granting organizations to do that. But the other piece that we did in creating this pedestrian-friendly environment is also created a central park and a performing arts center. Now, everybody said back then in 2000, because we spent 2 years doing the revisioning and the reimagining of the heart of the city, and they said it wasn't going to work in a suburban environment to put an urban setting there. Well, I can tell you today, we have a performing arts center that is operating in the black, when people didn't think that you could have a public facility that can do that. And you have a park that is welcoming to everybody. And what we wanted, and I said to the people, because when I was elected, our diversity in Burnsville was only 8%. We're now 20%. That the park would be a gathering place where we come to know and to learn and to be with one another, so we wouldn't be afraid of each other. And the Central Park, which is called Nicollet Commons Park, is a wonderful setting in the summertime where our community comes and gets to know one another, because we are a diverse community now than when I came into office. And the private sector has built those housing units. It is pedestrian friendly. We have a lot of commercial, and it's a mixed use development, but it's also walkable community.
So that's great.
And the thing is, the drug transactions that were taking place at an abandoned Walmart site where the parking lot was just breaking up and weeds were growing up around it, there is not one crime in that site, because everybody takes care of it. It's about being welcoming. It's about saying to people, this is a welcoming community, and we're going to love one another, and we're going to be compassionate, and we're going to show that through our acts of kindness. And we did that, and in 2016, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of I Love Burnsville.
That's great.
And so these, and also the 10th anniversary of our International Festival, which brings our community together, all in this area. And we're doing another redevelopment and reimagining on our commercial corridor. But it's about bringing people together and saying, your voice needs to be heard.
And so it's important that parks or infrastructure, you know, in addition to housing, things and infrastructure can bring people together in important ways. And it's important to make space in all of that kind of infrastructure for different kinds of people, including the most vulnerable in our cities. I want to ask Mayor Whaley, picking up on something that both of you said, Mayor Kotz and Mayor Bowser, about different kinds of tools, right? You talked about inclusionary zoning, tax increment financing, et cetera. And I read, Mayor Whaley, that you're excited to pursue opportunities to reinvest in low-income communities through this new federal program that some of you may have heard of, the Opportunity Zones program. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about this program, because a lot of people may have heard it but may not know what it is and how it can help cities, but more particularly, what promise it holds for low-income communities in particular.
Well, I think the opportunity zones are exciting because we don't really know yet, and so we can see how I think mayors have ideas on how we want to use them, and we're hoping that the rules the federal government rolls down, should it ever open again, would be good.
Let's hope.
Yes. So for us, you know, the way that the Opportunity Zones program works is the governors of each state designated a certain number of census tracts, a percentage that were of more distressed census tracts in our communities. And the idea is that folks can invest in those to get capital gains returns from the tax reform and bill. So we're hopeful about that. We're a little nervous in cities that are the size of Dayton and cities that are smaller because they are complex deals, and we are recognizing pretty quickly that this is a time where local governments, especially smaller communities, will need to partner with the governor's office to really make sure that the capacity is there to get these deals done. But the second part that I think we really are trying to work, at least in Ohio, and I know other states are working on this as well, is how can we use these designated census tracts to incite other kind of investment from the state and federal government. So, okay, we've all done this work to identify these areas. What other ways can we make sure that real investment happens there? Now, there is some concern, particularly for cities that are mid-sized in the middle of the country, that most of the investment will just, again, head to the coast. And so there's been significant writing about that, and that's a legitimate concern that we're having. And we're trying to make sure with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and other organizations to make sure that those rules are written so the intent of what Senator Booker and others that have moved this really happens. And so let me say this too, there's just not a lot of new tools that come down for this work. And so any tool that is new, you will see a mayor want to get all over that tool to really try to see if there's opportunities to incent investment in their communities.
So great. So one of the reasons I ask that question is because we're in an era in which mayors and cities have to rely increasingly on what we would call mobile capital, right? Hence the competition for Amazon, private investment, et cetera. And even the Opportunity Zone really is a vehicle for private investment. It's not the federal government doing what it used to do in the mid-20th century, the Robert Moses era, which is to say, hand big chunks of money to cities and let them redevelop. You guys are really having to go out and attract investment. And so those are big dollars. There are other big actors, governors, and also now the federal government. And I wonder, back to Mayor Bowser, about the role of ordinary citizens in your city when it comes to how you develop and how you use these tools. So Washington has long had advisory neighborhood commissions. I think there are about 40 now that are designed to bring the people closer to the government and the government closer to the people. And these commissions' input is supposed to be given great weight, as you know, according to the Home Rule Charter. How effective do you think they are in an era in which you have big players driving investment and redevelopment? Are they a real counterweight to that influence? And if,
Sure.
And, right. So if not, are there reforms that?
Well, you're talking to a former ANC commissioner.
I know. Yes, that's why.
You're talking to the daughter of a former ANC commissioner, and I value the input of advisory neighborhood commissions, and I certainly think they're called on to do more, and they are called, and we are called on to give them the tools that they need to be effective, and so they're not a monolith. People come with all different kinds of experiences and agendas that sometimes are very focused on what I call the as a whole agenda of our administration. And that means, when I say that, the one kind of hole you can get down with ANC commissioners is people are micro-parochial. So not just on a ward level, but on a single member district, 2,000 person level. And when you have a whole city of people who are micro-parochial, you can't get big things done for the city as a whole. So part of our challenge in working with ANC commissioners is that they can buy into the larger vision of the city. I think they will also have a role to play in, if you're going to do bigger things with housing, ANC commissions getting parochial has oftentimes meant that it's no. The answer is no. Or the benefits that they might negotiate for a particular development don't contribute to bigger city issues. So we continue to rely on our ANC commissioners and give them the tools that they need. And part of what I do, and great weight, now I'm being micro-parochial, but great weight in our city means that I have to listen to your advice, and if I don't take it, I have to tell you why. And so in our administration, we have tried to help ANC commissioners get focused on on that. And creating more transparency tools so that when they pass a resolution, that it goes up for the world to see, including our administration, including if we took their advice or if we went in another direction. So we're always looking for ways for people to get involved. And I'm going to say something else. So you talked about governors and cities. Well, we're unique, right? So we are
Statehood,
city,
lack of
county,
statehood.
and state,
Yes.
and we perform those functions. So it is, as I listen to my colleagues here, I picked the opportunity zones. I'm going to promote the opportunity zones
so
in
jealous
the
about that.
projects,
Right.
and I'm going to, do all that we can to implement those in a way that's going to bring us the type of development that we need.
So that's kind of the flip of what you normally hear about the disempowerment of Washington because of the lack of statehood. But you're saying that in some ways you're empowered by being.
Well, we have a strong mayor form of government, is what I
Okay,
say.
good. That's a nice
and,
spin.
We also have the ability, because we do have functions that other cities don't have. It's a big responsibility, but it's also, we are the DMV we do motor vehicles, we do Medicaid, and I'm also not among many mayors in saying that we also control our schools.
Right.
So the empowering aspect that you refer to is that we're small and we're nimble. It's me and it's 13 council members that make most of our policy and implement what we're able to do in Washington.
Right, that's great. So Mayor Couts, back to you. You're in a small city, so to speak, and one might think that, inclusion of citizens' voices is easier, and I keep reading one article about you and how one of the things that's marked your 6 terms is that you have kept a focus on relying on and including community members in solving the city's problems. There's one article states that you initiated a, quote, paradigm shift away from providing customer service to a partnership model, an approach that President Obama, in fact, used throughout his tenure. Can you talk more about how you implemented this paradigm and whether it's as challenging counterintuitively in a small place as it would be in a place like Washington?
Yeah. That's a great question because everybody looks at cities. All of us have the same issues. They're in different degrees. Mm-hmm. So I'm a city of 62,000 people, 27 square miles. And the thing that you have to do is you do have to talk to people, whether it's a city my size, Mayor Bowser's or Mayor Whaley's. It's about how you approach those tasks intentionally. And in bringing people together, it's connecting with the people in the city and the different organizations. So one of the things that we did was we trained, so when things happen and we need to elevate it, we trained focus group leaders. And we trained over 100 at one time, and then we go out and talk. In one of the experiences that we had, I chose elementary school, middle school, and high school to go in and talk to the kids, and we talked to churches. We went to every place. And then we bring all of that information in, because you see, people's times are precious, and they need to know that it's purposeful. And so in talking to them and building that coalition, and that they know their voices are heard, and then translating that into success factors and strategies, and then at the State of the City address, I report to them on how we're doing. And so in that way, they can see that their work has been purposeful and that we are working on it. And so they see it also in our monitoring reports that go out every month. So they can take a look, they can go on the city's website and understand that. I think one of the things that has been such a great success is our sustainability, where we're looking at protecting our planet. And after we signed the climate agreement in 2005 with the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I brought it back to my city and said that we need to look at this. And so we directed staff to do a white paper, and we did a deep dive and spent a year and a half talking with our people about it. They're all on board. And so are our companies. And we have a power plant that was a cold operated power plant. And on April 13, 2015, I'll never forget that date, the president of Xcel Energy and I stood at the plant and saw the last coal train come in to Burnsville. And let me tell you, that action reduced the carbon footprint in that area 46%. So it can be done when you're working with people and you're not legislating it down their throats. And you say, your voice needs to be heard, and here's the reason why. And creating and painting a picture of what that might look like for all of us and for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And Sheila, it's about, it's just about relationships.
Okay.
And it's about building trust, and it's about making sure that when people come, they know that their work, their voice are being valued, and that we're going to do something about it. It's not just going to sit on some shelf.
So that's a great example because it also brings up something else that you all are focused on, but particularly cities in the heartland are focused on, and that is the economic transition that we're going through. And so, and Mayor Whaley, in the city of Dayton, you're in the kind of eye of a lot of storms, right? Including unemployment, but also the opiate epidemic, et cetera. I read that that unemployment in your city has declined significantly under your mayorship, from 9.3, one report said, to 5.7%. Very impressive. You founded this Dayton Region Manufacturing Task Force, a regional effort that's committed to advocating for promoting a strong manufacturing workforce, and you've overseen a surge in new high-tech and research jobs. So this, the idea that we're in a transition both in energy from coal and manufacturing, we're in a new knowledge economy, we're in a high-tech economy. How are you bringing folks along? Right, in that, to find opportunities. How have you done it in Dayton, other than this manufacturing task force? What's your blueprint there?
Well, I think when we're thinking about the transition of the economy that's undergoing our country, and particularly in the heartland, you're thinking of it. You have to think of it generationally. So, young people that are in our education system, you know, the rules have changed for them than they were even for my generation or the generation before me. And so the requirement to make sure that you have an associate's or a bachelor's or some sort of certification is a must, because you're not going to be able to provide for your family without, you know, just a high school degree. It's just not going to cut it. And so really getting that message to that generation, and recognizing that, you know, how we teach and how we educate is very different, and unlike the power of the awesome Mayor Bowser, you know, I do not control schools and control those efforts, and so you have to really work with the governor or with the school board to really get that, because it's so key for the future of your community. Workforce is just king in these discussions around that. And so making sure that we're investing and paying attention to teaching differently, making sure it's about critical thinking and not just about, you know, the next test, and really being intentional for young people is key for the future of not just my city, but communities across the country. But at the same time, we have a tougher situation in the sense that, you know, you're talking about communities like Dayton where people did have a high school degree. They made $25 to $30 an hour, going to work, working hard, and being able to provide for their family. And that is not the case anymore. There's comments. I have opinions on that as well, but recognizing that, you know, the same building that used to have those jobs now houses jobs at $13.75 an hour is an incredible transition for our community. And I think there's a lot more that could be done around that issue, around work and around that dignity of people working hard and playing by the rules and getting further behind. And I think that that's really why we're at this crossroads and precipice around the conversation around the country. I think
Yeah.
people don't understand that. I don't think that the national media really gets it, and has a tendency to simplify it in a way that is demeaning to the middle of the country and really not thoughtful to the conversation that needs to move forward around work. And it's a serious issue, and it's an issue that's playing out in my community every single day. For us, we work to advocate to make sure that the people that have worked hard and played by the rules have a dignity of aging in a place that isn't one that isn't, is sad for them, right? That they can want to provide for their community and provide for their family and move forward. But at the same time, we have to be just, tireless about investing in young people. It's why the city of Dayton passed, universal pre-K. We put an income tax on the ballot in 2016, passed by double-digit margins. One of the few cities our size to do that, but I think it says a lot about the Daytonians that they know they have to invest in young people. They know they want to do it, and I think that's really going to be key for our future as well as we are going through this tremendous transition.
Okay, so before I turn over to the audience, I just want to ask Mayor Bowser, just because you're on the other side of this, DC is a high-tech haven, entrepreneurs, Amazon's coming to the region. Your challenges are a little bit different, or maybe not, right? You've got this stratification of high-tech opportunity and the workers that are trained for that, but incredibly high unemployment among our most vulnerable. Do you want to just speak?
No, I think that, for parts of our city, what the comments that Nan just made apply exactly to them as well, that they are either underemployed or unemployed and have challenges to getting into the employment market. So part of our strategy has been they're only going to get into the world of work with some help from us, from the city. So it'll either be in a workforce training program, a subsidized employment opportunity, which we have offered a lot of. And those are kind of what I call the short to medium term fixes. The long term fixes are what Nan described. We're heavily invested in our public education system, K-12. And the same focus that we put on K-12 for the last 10 years, we also need to have on those next 2 years. And I couldn't agree with Nan's comments more in saying that we're asking a lot more and in some ways different deliverables from our systems of higher education as well. Because we know that many people are not going to be able to afford to go to college. And so what are those 2-year opportunities that are going to get them a certification in a high need field? And all of us, the role that government has, an additional role is to say, these are the jobs that we know for the next 5 years, next 10 years, next 15 years. And how can you work with us to help train our employees for those jobs? And I think that tech is a great example of coming into cities like ours with a very specific curriculum in mind, and saying, to all the universities, if you can help us, with this type of worker, then we can guarantee that they will be employed. So those are the types of things that we know we have to be focused on in cities.
That's great. Okay. Let's go to the audience, okay? Some questions.
Hi, Mayor Bowser. My name's Chris White. I just graduated, got my bachelor's degree cum laude from Georgetown at age 40, so just before this.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm currently working with a team at the university that's very focused on the Opportunity Zone legislation. And because we're Georgetown, we're going to do a great job of getting input from investors, and high net worth individuals. I'm wondering what advice you could offer my team in terms of how to get input from the brightest minds from, sort of the neighborhood level. So, how to tap into the wisdom of local long-term residents.
Sure. So, Chris, one thing that we've done over the last 4 years, this will be our fifth time, and everybody at Georgetown will appreciate this, but we do something called March Madness. And part of March Madness is we advertise to the investment community, the developer community, all of the economic development opportunities in the city. And we have focused on city projects. So if we have public land, then we'll say we're requesting proposals to partner with us to develop this land. We also do it for our schools and recreation projects. And this year, we're going to add a section on opportunity zones. So we will highlight the 26 opportunity zones that we have in DC. We'll talk about the characteristics of those zones, and we will ask for input there. That would be a great opportunity for potential investors to see from my economic development team how we view the opportunities, why we chose those zones, some current activity, but it would also put your team in the room with other interested people. That'll be in March.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Adam Gutman. I'm a first-year MBA student here. Thank you all for being here and presenting this evening. I'm curious if you could speak to the managerial challenges you face when implementing new technology in infrastructure. You've got siloed departments within cities dealing with departments of transportation or like Octo here in DC. How do you get them all to work together to implement new solutions?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. If I could start, and that's actually a question that we have. We proposed a solution for in my second term, and because of the problem you mentioned, I created a new cluster of agencies that will be led by a deputy mayor for operations and mobility, transportation and operations, I think is what we're calling it, and I've teamed those agencies that have something to do with mobility and how we get people around and our infrastructure and sustainability. We had them clustered differently before, like focused on how we get development projects done faster. And now we have them focused on how do we move people around our city, harden our environment, and make it greener and more sustainable. So that's just trying to break down silos. It sounds like you know something about local government. It's easy to get kind of siloed in your subject matter instead of your purpose. And if you're in DDOT, your purpose is to help people move and to do it reliably, affordably, and sustainably. And so that is how we're trying to build the agencies around them.
And so I'm curious about your experiences also, the rise of smart cities and technology and how that's helping to break down silos in particular.
Okay. Well, when I came into office, one of the first things I did was dissolved all the silos. And there was an experience that happened when I came into office that highlighted for everybody that the problem at this apartment building had different lenses. The inspectors had a lens, the parks department had a lens, the police department had a lens, the school had a lens, but they were all fragmented. So pulling them all together, and I said, you're not solving the problem because you're only looking at it from your own lens, and it's a bigger problem, so we need to solve it. So this is how I convinced everyone that they had to work in work teams to address certain issues within the community rather than silos, because police and permit license inspectors need to work together. Fire and our development community, our planning community need to work with police, fire, and all of the other divisions in the city. Let me give you an example. We used to have water meters that you have to have an employee drive the streets and then gather the information. But in talking to people, because we have a lot of snowbirds, what snowbirds are is that people who exit Minnesota and go south or to any places in our country. So what would happen is that their waters would burst and nobody would know that there's this problem. So the inspectors knew about it, people in the water department knew about it, and so what we did was we convened everybody, and now we have a system that we put in place, over 17,000 water meters in the last, completed that project 2 years ago. It was a lot of money, but it was real time, more efficient, and all of that information comes into City Hall. But it took people from every department, from finance to water to administration and our community, to solve the problem together. But it all started with an apartment building when it was about my second or third year in office where this happened, and I said, silos don't work, and everybody saw it. So no silos, they don't work, and you can work in work teams, and we function very effectively and very efficiently on all levels because there are no silos.
I would say just two examples. The city of Dayton's around 150,000 people. It's around 1,900 employees. We run the airport, the water department. It's very, especially with enterprise zones where they're funding themselves versus general fund, it becomes very difficult to get people because they're counting, especially, when we enter the Great Recession, you're counting every single penny. So a couple of things that we did was, first we redesigned our entire budget process. So we have these CSA areas, and so when they come to ask for money, it's about these outcomes, particularly like justice, infrastructure. So 5 department heads will be sitting together and working off of each other, because you can't really deal, it's not just the police officers that are dealing with some of our crime issues, it's the judges and the clerk of court's office, and much more broad system. And I think that that's allowed some real specific collaboration to happen across different departments in a way that wouldn't have happened if we weren't tying it to dollars. And I think that's had some successes. Secondly, the second example I would give is I'm a big fan of the collective impact model across a large community. There's collective impact models particularly around K through 12 or K through 16, and really how do you align everybody in a community to drive a result, not just the city, but other organizations. And actually we had a really terrific success with this on the opioid addiction issue. Unfortunately, Dayton was one of the leaders in the country a few years ago of them leading the accidental overdose deaths in the country. Had a tremendous issue in 2016 and 2017. What we did, we aligned the entire community. Over 60 organizations came to the table and said, hey, we've got to do whatever we can to really deal with the issue of addiction and start treating addiction like the disease it is in our communities across the country, but specifically Dayton. That alignment led to a 50% drop in accidental overdose deaths over 1 year. And I definitely believe there's definitely Medicaid expansion and treatment is a big key of that, but the alignment of every community group to say this is the outcome for the community, this is the focus for the year, that collective impact model is something that I think is definitely a best practice on all sorts of issues, from education to addiction issues.
Okay, great. So we have to start wrapping up because we've been here a long time. It may not feel that way because we
go so fast when we're
great conversation. But I do want to ask one last question of our panelists, because we've talked about some big themes and often their intention with each other, and it makes your job particularly challenging. So I want to ask each of you, what is the thing in doing this work, trying to balance infrastructure with inclusion, bring innovation in, et cetera. What is the thing you feel most misunderstood? You think your constituents most misunderstand about what you're doing? I just want to give you the floor. Right. So what do you feel most misunderstood about?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
That is a great question. I think people ask me to deliver a lot of things. So wherever you live in the city, people want quality schools, safe neighborhoods, they want great retail amenities, great transit, and all of those different things.
All at an affordable cost.
And they want it affordably, and
Don't raise taxes.
right. So all of those, and that's what I will, when I'm not the mayor anymore, that's what I'm going to want for the next mayor. I want them to be able to deliver all of those things. And my approach to doing that has always been to work with communities, get a plan, and help deliver on that plan. And so I think that sometimes people mistrust private sector come in. They mistrust the development community coming in. And they want all those things, and they think the government provides it.
Right.
And so what I tell people, the government, you don't want the government, necessarily building your housing or your hospital or your all of these things that is better when we have a partner. And so I think that that's the kind of a big misunderstanding, that if you are revitalizing, and to go back to where we started, if you're revitalizing in communities, it's not just the government. It's the government, it's the private sector, and the community. And so we'll keep working on making sure that we're getting that point across, and that everybody is part of getting the communities that we want.
That's great. Okay.
So it is a great question, because what I get from people when they're asking me, don't let them build on that, because they believe that that property belongs to the city. And then I'd look at them and I said, who owns your house? And they said, well, I do. I said, the city doesn't own any property except those properties that our facilities and our parks are located. Otherwise, everything else belongs to the private sector. And when they don't want a development to come in and they think that you can stop the development, and I said, you do know that there's a constitutional right for property owners. But what we do is to put in place land use zoning, so you don't have your house here and then a manufacturing facility next door to it that's making a lot of noise. So zoning helps us to separate all of that, but we have no authority whatsoever except through land use. And then the property owner has a right, and in filing that application, it is our responsibility to respond through the different zoning and codes. But over and over in the 24 years that I've been mayor, people think government owns all the properties until you ask them, who owns your house?
Interesting. Mayor Whalen.
I think what's interesting about this work, I love being a mayor. I think mayors are the best of.
We make a difference.
They're the most pragmatic. There's something very special. I've been, active in politics for over 20 years, but getting to do this work, particularly with cities, is something just very, very special. And I noticed when I was first elected, people would come up to me, and Dayton has gone through some really tough times. We have to, we're eyes wide open about the challenges and opportunities that we have. And I was taken aback by the number of citizens that would say oh, I would just never want that job. It was almost like they felt sorry for me. And I was really taken aback, because I really fought for this job, right? And so I was well, I don't know if I'm not smart or they're not. So I think that's a misunderstanding. People can't understand why folks will put themselves out there to just, be a dogged leader for the community. And particularly in communities that really need leadership, because it's tough. It's not the easiest thing, but it is so fulfilling, so very fulfilling. And what I've also noticed is, as we've started to see wins in Dayton, you're starting to see some turns, just some national trends, for example, that Dayton is winning on is, people want to live in cities. That didn't happen until 2010. From 1960 to 2010, people were wanting to live in suburbs. So, we benefit from these trends. And you start to see that people start they feel better overall about just the system. And then they start to think like, oh, your job's not that bad. And I think that is definitely correlated to like how they feel about their community. And that's, I think, one of the best but most misunderstood things about this work is, number one, you know, you have to be both lucky and good in doing this type of leadership. But number two, people just really have no understanding of what it is until you're there. And that's an interesting place to sit, I think, you know.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky. Thank you for your service. You guys are all doing a fantastic job. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the conversation. Great. Thank you. And I think we're going to hear some wrap-up from Uwe Brandis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Uwe Brandis. I'm the faculty director of the Global Cities Initiative. The Global Cities Initiative is a collection of faculty and students who are passionate about cities, passionate about our own home city and cities around the world. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to the Institute of Politics, and a special shout out to Hannah Hope, who's done an amazing amount of work to pull this together. But most of all, I invite all of you to join me in thanking our special guests. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for coming. Good night.